how does intimate partner violence or domestic violence impact mental health? And so I'm hoping I can give kind of a snapshot of this today. And, as we're talking through, please think of maybe some patients that you've seen or some cases that you've had that you want to maybe bring up and share with the group, and we can discuss if that's helpful. I want to just mention, I know that you've had 2 prior echoes on this topic and really kind of going over the prevalence and the severity and the impact of these conditions, and actually very specifically how to address some of them in an ED setting. And so the only little background that I want to give is really talking about, I don't know if people saw some of the most recent data that came out in February from 33 maternal mortality review committees across the United States, looking at close to 12,000 deaths. And what those deaths demonstrated is that 22.2% of those deaths were either due to suicide, drug overdose, or homicide. And looking at homicide in and of itself, that's primarily due to intimate partner violence, as well as, sorry, Rachel, I'm not talking about the slides yet, but we'll get there. But that, this time of pregnancy and the postpartum year is actually the highest risk time for a woman to die at the hands of her partner in comparison to non-pregnant states. So, we've already learned about the kind of prevalence of this problem. It's even heightened in pregnancy. So with that background, we can go ahead forward with the next slide. I just wanted to just share a story. I think people probably might recall this event. This was Ray Rice. He's an NFL linebacker at the time for the Ravens. And in an elevator in 2014, he punched his fiance hard enough to knock her unconscious in the elevator. He was accused of domestic violence, and he was suspended for 2 great games from the NFL. Next slide. So what happened was the security video from that elevator surfaced, and it went viral. And if anyone's ever seen this video, it is so disturbing. And it really provoked, even though everyone knew in writing what actually transpired here, the video of this really provoked quite an outrage and attention to this subject, and kind of demanding more response from the community and NFL. But it took a really interesting turn, the story did, which is the next slide, was that Ms. Palmer actually spoke out at a press conference, and she apologized for the event. She deeply regretted the role that she played that night. On Instagram, she posted, just know we'll continue to grow and show the world what real love is, really pleading with others to not take anything away from the man that she loved. A few weeks later, Rice was formally charged, and literally the next day, Rice and Palmer were married. And this provoked a whole nother set of response from our public, which I see a lot in medicine, which is, next slide, is people just really racking their brain and not understanding this. Why would someone stay, let alone defend a man who had knocked them unconscious? What's wrong with her? Her questions about her sanity, her innocence, her motives, really pretty much attacking this person and her character, and really just not understanding why it is that she was doing what she was doing. So this yet provoked another response. Next slide. From victims advocates and women's health group really spoke out in defense of Palmer to help people really understand these very complicated dilemmas that women face when they're in a relationship with violence, or anyone faces in a relationship with violence, and just kind of the multifactorial and complexity of these cases, and really tried to convey this. And I think one of the most effective ways in which it was conveyed is this woman, Beverly Gooden. She's an HR manager in North Carolina. She started a hashtag, Why I Stayed. And she basically listed the reasons why she stayed in a violent marriage. So the next slide. And then what this prompted was hundreds of victims coming forward and sharing their story and helping people understand why they stayed. And so if we go to the next slide, what some researchers did is they saw this as like, wow, we have all of this qualitative data. Why not collect all this data, code it, analyze it, and really kind of categorize it so that people can kind of see how this groups together, and what are some of the major drivers for the reasons why women stay in abusive relationships. And I'm going to go through each of these kind of one by one and dissect them a bit and talk about them. But I think this is just one element of why people stay, right? This is a woman's voice telling you why they stay, but it doesn't give the full context of domestic violence. So I just want to take a step back for a second and talk about that before we kind of dissect each of these. So if we go to the next slide. I think, the image that always comes to mind when I'm working with someone who's experienced domestic violence or intimate partner violence is that this has been a long-standing relationship. Like, this is something that has progressed over time. And in the beginning, the relationship was really good, sometimes like amazingly good. This was something that maybe that person really felt they connected. This was the love of their life, what have you. And it was at one point this beautiful beach scene, right? And then over time, as abuse evolves, it's this very slow, chronic, insidious deterioration of oneself, their self-worth, their self-efficacy, and their agency by an aggressor. And that can start out really subtly. That could be, maybe just being a little bit critical, a little bit judgmental, but ultimately getting to the place where that person feels like they're not good enough, they're inadequate, they're unlovable, they get degraded and humiliated, and there's a tremendous amount of shame that they internalize, meaning that the patient or the person internalizes with this and begins to blame themselves for all of this. And so, when we're seeing someone come into the emergency room who is, physically, showing signs of abuse, I would just stop and take a second to recognize that there was years of leading up to this point. So to get to the point where there is actually, if you can actually, sorry, I animated, if you can go ahead and click, to get to the point where there is actually verbal abuse, physical abuse, or sexual abuse, there needed to be this kind of priming of this person being in a place in which they really had no sense of self-worth or self-esteem or self-efficacy or agency. And that's when the verbal abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse starts getting layered on. And what's important about that abuse is that really someone only needs to be physically abused once for that to then be a constant threat in their relationship. So maybe they got hit once, but ultimately, if they know in that relationship, that could be a consequence of their behavior becomes very controlled. So they're living in this constant threat. And what they do with that threat is you mitigate it by kind of stepping in line with what that aggressor wants. And that can be things that kind of further perpetuate the abuse, socially isolating that person so that they don't have anyone else in their life that is mirroring to them what's actually happening or giving them any sense of value or self-worth in other areas. So you kind of socially isolate them. You can financially kind of hinder them so that they can't be they're essentially dependent on their aggressor. And all the while, this person is saying that, but I love you. That's why I'm doing this. I love you. No one else is going to love you. So just wanted to kind of paint this picture of what this looks like. So that when someone does hit our emergency room or hit our ICU or is inpatient, we kind of have a fuller picture of this snapshot that you're seeing them in. So if you go to the next slide. So this is my analogy of, someone who is like physically coming in with signs of abuse. I usually think of the internal process and that house, that person is destabilized. And so really just kind of thinking about, well, now you're going to ask the question, why does this person not leave? Why do they stay? When this person really, from a physical, psychological, emotional perspective, is kind of feeling like this house at the moment. So if we go back to what women were saying in this context of the study and why I stayed, the first one is distorted thoughts. And if you go to the next slide, I'll explain that a little bit more. I think that there's a lot of distorted thoughts that occur in the context of abuse, because in some ways you actually have to distort reality a little bit to be able to live in the context of constant threat of violence. And so there's a lot of cognitive distortions that happen during this time. And we can talk about that in the context of therapy, because that's really one of the main targets. So people will express things like, I believed that I deserved it. I was ashamed, embarrassed. I blamed myself. I thought if I did these things, I would trigger him. So you hear that a lot, that, the triggering him, it says two things. It says that, first of all, this is my fault, and it gives the delusion that you could actually control it, right? So that, and thinking that you can control it gives a sense of safety, and also gives you a sense of that, like that you have some control of the situation, which you really don't. Oftentimes people will minimize the abuse as a way of coping with it. I stayed because I thought, I didn't think that the emotional and financial abuse was really abuse. Words didn't leave bruises, because I didn't know what my boyfriend did to me was rape. And that's actually, this is the context in which I see domestic violence the most. Is it's someone that's come to work with me because they have depression or anxiety or something else is going on in their life. And as you start teasing apart what is actually happening in their life and what's happening in their relationships, you start to uncover verbal abuse or physical abuse or sexual abuse of which people were not fully aware of. And again, that can be around distorting reality. It can be around what you've been told, what you've internalized. So this is often kind of a big facet of what we're addressing in therapy. So next slide. And I think, I kind of hit on this with those prior slides, the damaged self-worth and just the chronic insidious nature of this, where people get to the point where they believe that they're worthless and alone. And I had done something wrong and I deserved it. So next slide. So fear. So the point in which somebody is even considering or actually leaving an aggressor is the most dangerous time in the overall course of a domestic violence relationship. Estimates vary, but there's some estimates saying that women are 70 times more likely to die at this point than any other point during this relationship. So leaving the relationship is a very is a scary time. That is a reality, but it also is a very powerful reason why people don't leave, because they're afraid of what's going to happen if they do. So, I was afraid of him. I knew he'd make leaving very ugly and drawn out nightmare. One woman felt trapped because of her husband's threats, that he would, hold this person down, harming all their loved ones, killing their kids while I watched, and then killing me. So, women are, these women were describing living under this constant threat of something horrific happening to them if they ever left. And then also facing the real reality of, if I do leave, this is actually a really high risk time. And so people often feeling very paralyzed by fear. So next slide. So this one is very interesting, wanting to be a savior. So, people think that they can change other people, that I believe that, that like I could love the abuse out of him, or I thought I would be strong, the one who would never leave him and show him loyalty. I would fix him and teach him love. His father died, he became an alcoholic, and God wouldn't want me to leave because he needed me. And so, I see this as two things. So yes, wanting to be the savior, wanting to save this person, but fundamentally that belief is then that you think that your behavior is affecting this person's behavior, which is a distortion. And that somehow that love is something that can fix abuse in this way. And so kind of helping women to pick that part a little bit more. And we can talk about that a little bit more in the end, just kind of how to address some of those distortions. So next slide. So a major thing that prevents women from leaving are their children. So they're going to put their children first, that they sometimes feel like if their partner is not beating them, they're going to beat their children. So they're going to be the one that is going to take the abuse. And that, sometimes people think that they're staying for their children, that this is actually beneficial to have a father figure in the household, as opposed to leaving. So children are a major driver of why people stay. Next slide. So family experiences and expectations, really understanding from somebody's family history, how they see relationships, what their experiences were like growing up, how they learned about relationships, how you learned about people treating each other. And, expectations around religion, what your family has taught you in terms of values around marriage and relationships, and your experiences. So these were examples of people that grew up in abuse and therefore continued that pattern in their relationship because that's what they knew. And then also, just experiences of being told that, you don't break up your marriage for any reason, no matter what it is. Next slide. Financial constraints, yes. So this is a huge one, right? So it's often a method by which people are, aggressors are typically keeping women in the relationship, because if you don't have any money, if you don't have any resources, if you can't take care of yourself, and in particular, if you can't take care of your kids, you're very unlikely to be successful in leaving and becoming independent. Sometimes abusers will, you will see in their relationships, they're literally preventing that person from finishing a degree so that they could get a job, or preventing them from having a job because they have to stay home and take care of the kid. We could never have any childcare, right? Or they go out and they rack up thousands of dollars of debt in that person's name so that that person could never actually go out and get a loan and be successful. So finances are a major way to control people. Isolation, we talked about this a little bit before. This woman said, I was literally trapped in the backwoods of West Virginia, and he would keep her there and close to keep her there by keeping her there and close to her son. The other part of it, so there's like kind of the physical isolation, but there's also the emotional and psychological isolation where, aggressors are telling their partner, you can't, I'm the only person in your life. I'm the only relationship. You can't have any friends or family. It's kind of me or them. And it creates this dichotomy. And it's like, you got to cut off all these other friends, family, anybody else in order to be with me. So again, that further isolates people. So the approach, and we'll kind of talk more about the therapeutic approach in a second, but right, the approach with this always has to be immediate safety for victim and other potential victims and children. And so, working with women who are, or working with anybody, I know, I don't mean to say that men don't experience domestic violence or intimate partner violence. They absolutely do. The preponderance of people, however, are women. So, what's the home situation look like? What's the safety of the home? Are there guns? How are they stored? Are they loaded? Are they easily accessible? What other weapons are in the home? What other threats that are given to you that we could actually see how that could take place in your home setting? And how do we secure the safety of the home so that these things are less likely to happen? They're less accessible in some way. We do a lot of planning with women around, you may not be ready to leave right now, for sure, that's okay. But in the case of things escalating at some point and you need to get the hell out of there, you need to have a go bag. And what we just talk about is what needs to be in that bag. So oftentimes an extra set of car keys, important documents like birth certificates, social security card, passports, things that are really critical if you were to leave, things that might be really important to like the next 24 hours, diapers and formula, change of clothes, that sort of thing. And so creating this go bag that if things get really bad, at least you have this to grab and to go. We also talk about every day just keeping your phone, your keys in the wallet in the same place, so that if you did have to run out of the house, you know where they are, grab them quickly and go if you can. You have to have a plan of where to go. So, you don't want to be at the height of this, really frantic situation where your life is being threatened and not have a plan. This plan has to be premeditated. It has to be rehearsed. It has to be routine so that you can just implement it. You're not deciding where to go when you're running out of the house. You've already decided where this is going to be. Who's in your court, who can you call, who can help you, and actually setting that up in advance to let that person know, hey, this, if I need to, can I come here? If I need to, how can we help you, or that person help them? A lot of people set up code words with that particular person. So they might be on the phone, their aggressor might be there, and they might be able to say a particular word that tells that person, I'm in danger, I'm in threat, you need to call the police, that sort of thing. So it's really around kind of safety planning. So next slide. So in terms of, the therapeutic approach here and some of the things that we're dealing with, obviously we want to identify and treat any comorbid mental health conditions. These are really commonly occurring, such as substance use, mood and anxiety, PTSD, commonly occur in the context of domestic violence. And, who knows which one came first, but oftentimes they're there together. And it's really hard to make a plan and change your life when you are in the throes of a depressive episode or dealing with anxiety or substance use. So that has to be something that's being addressed and hopefully resolving to get to a different place in your life. I think I talked about this before, just to how important somebody's past is, and really understanding how that past might be affecting the present, and just recognizing what patterns might you be repeating here and why. And then going back to, again, why is it that they're staying? Like, what are the stuck points? And kind of systematically going through each of those to unstuck them, to figure out, well, what are the things that we can put in place that would make this have less of a hold on you? I can't remember what the next slide is. Yep, so those are the things that we talk about. But I might, let me see what time it is. Yeah, so I might actually just stop there for a minute, and we can discuss some of this, whatever aspects people want to talk about. These were resources that I think were given before, but I cannot say enough about resources. So, and again, these resources are to be utilized when not in the obviously, if you're in the throes of needing support, yes, but it's oftentimes to really learn about these things and what resources might be available to you so that you can put together a plan that makes it easier to leave. When you've never had a job before, well, one of the first things that you need is figuring out, how do I get some vocational training? How do I actually make myself available to be able to eventually get a job? And so knowing what resources are there to help you take that next step are really important. Shelter, where are you going to be living, etc. So I'll go ahead and stop there. I don't know if folks have any questions.